Folks, I have a very dynamic guest with me today, Bryan Bellamy. Bryan is the founder and CEO of the Refinery House, a digital agency and consultancy based out of Charlotte. I'll let Bryan give an introduction here in a minute, but I was introduced to him fairly recently and was absolutely blown away. Bryan's young, although since I'm old AF, everyone seems young to me. So how old are you, Bryan?
Yeah, thanks, John, first for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to a fun bit of time here. I'm 27 now, actually. Yeah, the old age, I'm starting to get some gray hairs and the sideburns and everything's looking good.
You're a baby, but with an impressive resume for sure, and we'll certainly get into that. And I want the folks to think back to what they were doing at 27 and feel really good about themselves. But first, you've brought a couple of whiskeys. What are we going to sample here first?
Yeah. So this first one is the CYPB Weller. It's also known as the White Bottle, kind of in the bourbon community. And Weller is a wheated bourbon, but this is the CYPB. It's kind of the upper third of all of the Buffalo Trace brands that they carry. So it's one of my favorite kind of special bourbons. And then we've got another one that we're going to try round two here in a minute called Noah's Mill, and that's kind of a higher proof and my favorite daily sipper, if you will. Yeah.
Daily sipper every day?
Yeah, maybe not quite every day, but yeah.
Well, cheers. I'm looking forward to tasting it.
Thanks, sir.
Wow, that's really good.
Should be really smooth and just elegant. No real hard bite. Just a nice long aftertaste there.
Yeah, it's complex for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, part of what Refinery House does is build applications for companies, and you've gotten some really great traction on that side of the business. A lot of the questions that I've come prepared to ask will be geared towards details of running and scaling this side of the company, since that's where I've personally spent a lot of time.
Sure.
But I do want to get into the other side of the business as well, and I especially want to talk about your history. So you've now started how many companies?
Let's see, 3, 6, 7, about 7 companies now.
7 companies. Wow. 27. And how many of those have you sold?
We have exited 2 of those businesses.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that's great. So Bryan, can you go ahead and just introduce yourself and the current company, Refinery House?
Sure. Yeah. So Refinery House is a digital agency, as you said. It was kind of born out of the idea that software and marketing live harmoniously together in our current lives. So why can't they live together in a business? And the concept was being able to build something for someone and then also take it to market for them. And so instead of having to hand the project off to someone else who doesn't know the intricacies or didn't build it, doesn't have all of the product knowledge, this similar team gets to then take it to market and kind of describe it to the customer base.
So I take it that you probably have some design resources on both sides of the house. Is it the same people, or do you segment them into different roles?
So there are some that are strictly siloed in either side of the business, and then there are some that kind of cross back and forth.
Okay, great. So did your parents encourage entrepreneurship when you were growing up, or where did this come from?
That's a great question. First, Mom and Dad, if you're listening, I had the best parents ever of all time.
Okay.
No, so
after my wife's parents and my parents.
Yes. Okay. Third best. Sorry, Mom and Dad. So yeah, they were really actually great parents. That they didn't encourage entrepreneurship specifically. They just encouraged me, and it was kind of what I wanted to do. I can think back. If you ask that question to my mom, she'd tell you the stories of me sitting in my front yard when I was little, selling all my toys to kids down the street, and setting up my own Saturday morning garage sale with my plastic cash register to start making some money. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, not counting that business, the toy sale business, how far back do we have to go before you started your first company? Like when did you start the first company? So in other words, how old were you when you were Bryan without a company?
So I think There's a couple ways to answer this question. My first very legitimate business was started in college, but I could go back to about 5th grade when I started my lawn
lawn mowing business,
my lawn company, and we grew that. I mean, I employed several of my friends every single weekend. We cut. At one point, we had about 31 yards that we cut.
Wow.
On a weekly basis.
That's awesome. Did you ever get into any commercial contracts, or was it all
We had
residential?
some at the kind of right before I graduated high school. We had some heavy equipment, so we were doing lots of landscaping as well, some great, dirt moving, grading, really all kinds of different stuff.
Excellent. Well, that's a great experience for sure. In addition to the support that you always got from your parents, what sort of influences did you have, leading up to that experience of building your first, what you called legitimate business in college?
Yeah, I think for me, historically, I really wanted to be a doctor. And so a lot of my influences early on were people in the medical community. So various surgeons. I still have a couple of mentors. One's a brain surgeon. The other one is a physician and internist, actually. But so I always thought that I was going to go to medical school and graduate with an MD and be in a hospital for the rest of my life. But it kind of struck me in college coincidentally, and so I took a slight left-hand turn and never really looked back, or haven't looked back yet. I think I'd still like to do medical school as a hobby one day, but in terms of strictly influences, I didn't have too many entrepreneurial influences other than I knew that I wanted to work for myself, and I didn't know if that meant owning my own practice as a doctor or just having my own company, period.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That was kind of inborn. Your parents didn't push it, and nobody that you saw was doing it.
No, they definitely didn't try to point me in one direction or the other. Just told me to do what I thought I loved. So.
Now you mentioned that you wanted to be a doctor. Does that mean what did you study at school? Was it something to get you onto that doctor track?
I was a biochem major at College of Charleston. Yep.
Okay, great. And you mentioned that you started your first company during college. Was it at Charleston then?
It was at the College of Charleston. It was called Perkle, and the idea was born out of wanting to know where all of the specials were on a daily basis in our college community, because obviously we were in college, we didn't have any money, so on a daily basis we were looking for the places to go buy the $1 beer or the 10-cent chicken wing or anything like that. So
I'd still like to have that.
exactly. So we built this application. Actually, it started as an Excel spreadsheet, and then that got kind of a pain in the butt to distribute constantly. So I decided that this whole thing needed to live inside of a mobile application. So that's inevitably how it became.
So that was about 7 or 8 years ago then, or?
That was exactly 7 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. You were probably on iOS 6 where they started.
That is a great question. I haven't thought about that in
that
quite
might be
a while.
iOS 5 even. Yeah.
I think it was 5. It was either 4 or 5.
And it was back when they were all the one form factor. So
that is correct. It was only the 3.5-inch screen at that point.
But no Swift, so you were doing it in Objective-C.
That's exactly right. Yes, that was pre-Swift, pre-4-inch iPhone, pre-Retina display, pre-all of that with the original version. Yep.
Very interesting. And how did you know how to program Objective-C, or did you teach yourself as a result of knowing that you wanted to build a mobile app?
No, so we just kind of cobbled it together, the MVP, and once we had proof of concept, I went to kind of raise some money there for it. So we took an initial seed investment with our very cobbled together MVP that we built.
And was that just somebody you could convince at the college to put some money in, or?
No, so it was actually a gentleman here in Charlotte invested our original round, and that's kind of what kicked us off.
Was he just an angel investor?
He was, yeah.
So not part of a fund?
Nope.
How long did you own Perkle?
Perkle in total was just right at about 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what made you decide to exit it? Was there somebody else that wanted to run with it, or?
Yeah, there's a company called Foursquare came in, and that was right as they were about to split into Foursquare and Swarm, I believe, is kind of the reason they were starting to hunt around for some things that they could assess, and we essentially became part of their new data initiative for their local data business.
Interesting. So how old were you when you sold your company to Foursquare?
22.
22. Wow, that's amazing. When did you know you wanted to sell it during that 2-year process?
I really didn't. We were about to actually roll out to Atlanta, and we were kind of doing a geographical based rollout, and we got to a point where we weren't even actually generating, we weren't cash flow positive. And then we kind of got a knock on the door that said, hey, we'd like to just go ahead and get what you have right now. And so
that's great.
We said yes.
How long did you stick around Instagram afterwards?
What do you mean Instagram?
Not Instagram, I'm sorry, Foursquare.
Oh, no problem.
Foursquare.
Not very long at all. I think in total we had a relationship with them for about 9 months after the fact.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great. So when they came knocking on the door, did you hire any bankers or just lawyers, or what did you?
No, luckily the gentleman that invested in us originally had a team, an M&A team. He had sold and bought multiple businesses. He was actually a CFO of a really large company up in Manhattan, and had a ton of experience in the financial sector. So he was able to kind of guide us and do everything.
So he gave you cash and actual strategic support.
He did, yeah. It was a good, sweet first deal.
That's excellent. So he structured the deal for you? Pretty much,
yeah. I didn't. I was kind of still naive and oblivious to a lot of the stuff that was happening and important and relevant to a deal like that. And so he kind of led the way there.
Yep. So you're 22, you sell it, you spend 9 months kind of still engaged with Foursquare. What did you start next?
So out of that, my original plan was to go back to medical school. I was prepared to jump right into MUSC at that point, and I was going to ride off into the sunset as an MD. And
I'll be right back. Keep going.
Sure. We were getting so many questions from kind of friends and family and our close community and contacts about technology in general, just because they knew that we had something to do with some sort of technology. And so at that point, I had a couple of acquaintances still that were engineers, and we went ahead and I reached out to a couple of them, one gentleman in Austin, Texas, and we started a company called VectorWish.
Okay.
And VectorWish was a small web development agency, very small. It was, at its peak, there was 4 people at VectorWish. We grew it to not a terribly large company, but we had a ton of very small paying monthly retainer clients for support, as well as some cloud service management, things like that. And a gentleman that was out in California but moving to the East Coast wanted to pick up a client roster on the East Coast.
So he bought some logos.
So essentially that's exactly what he did.
That's great. And did this come out of the lessons you had learned at Perkle, or what made you decide that you needed to start VectorWish?
VectorWish, I just kind of saw an opportunity and wanted to provide a service that could help these people that were kind of asking these questions. It was just a lot of, well, I'm starting a business too, can you build out our tech stack for us? And at the time I currently couldn't, so I needed to have a vehicle to be able to service all of these people. So that's kind of how VectorWish was born.
And how long were you involved before you sold it to the other gentleman, and how long did he want you to stick around to transition things?
I did not have to stick around at all on that one. Actually, my partner was the one that kind of carried the baton after the fact. I actually didn't own all of VectorWish outright. Only had about 1/4 of the company. Okay. And the rest of the partners kind of took care of the exit. I knew already kind of what my next idea was for a business, so I was headed in that direction already.
And you were there working on it for how long? I didn't catch that.
In VectorWish?
Yeah.
That one lasted in total about 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So what was the next idea or the next company?
Well, in building a lot of these websites, there was so much opportunity for actual application development at that point. And the people that I was involved with at VectorWish, they weren't real game for starting to get into the mobile application business. And this is right as the App Store was, really taking off, peaking. Things are going crazy in that world. So again, saw an opportunity and knew that I needed to be able to provide a service for people to to build them mobile applications, and so that's when we started the Iridium software company.
What's it called? The Iridium.
The Iridium software company.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what was different in your mind with this company from Vector Wish? Because it sounds like there might be a little bit of overlap.
Yeah, I would say this is definitely more of an engineering firm,
Okay.
where Vector Wish was a very light kind of web agency.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. So at this point, you've started 3 companies now. At this point in your history, what things surprised you on your second and third go around that maybe you didn't see the first time around?
Yeah, I think kind of on the after the first one, I realized what things mattered in terms of tying things to revenue to be able to grow and scale your business. Kind of for me in the first go around, I was easily distracted by things that really didn't matter, whether that be, creating merch or just buying stickers or putting your name on a billboard or just ridiculous things that you think matter a little bit, but when you look back, you're like, that drove no value. There was very low ROI on that one. So the second and third time, it was a lot easier.
I'm glad you're still buying merch. That's how I got this wonderful shirt.
Thanks.
I'm glad some traditions didn't die.
That's right. Yeah, well, we're a little bit farther along in this business. We can actually pay cash for the shirts, not on credit.
Okay.
So, so I think it was a lot easier to cut through the noise in terms of people telling you, oh, do this, do that. It's like, no, I actually have a path to being cash flow positive, and I'm going to stick to it and cut everything else out.
So was it were most of your clients at Iridium, were they web-based, were they mobile, were they a mixture of the two?
Mixture of the two, mostly mobile though. That's when we started going pretty much really heavy mobile.
Okay, excellent. And knowing what you know now, when you look at Iridium and Vector Wish, what do you think you would do differently today? I mean, you mentioned focus more on revenue. That's obviously something that you seem to have learned, but are there any other things that you, thinking back, you would do differently with those 2 companies?
I can't say I would do anything differently. I learned from a lot of my mistakes that I made, so I'm thankful that I made them, and now the refinery house is benefiting significantly from those mistakes and past experiences. So honestly, everything went kind of roughly according to plan and allowed me to mature in not only running a company, but as a human being as well, in terms of managing lots of different things.
It's interesting because before we started Level, my co-founder and I had started another company together, and we never made more than maybe $1,000 of revenue with that company, and we worked our asses off. But the reality is we could have never started Level without the lessons that we learned with that company.
Very wise.
That's part of why I tell folks, look, if you've got an idea and you've got the means to do it and the passion and the energy and the skills, just get in the game. And this may not be the company that fulfills all your dreams for you, but being in the game and learning from the mistakes that you make and the successes that you have is so invaluable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I've learned and been molded by so many of the things that have gone wrong have actually prevented a lot of other mistakes from being made. So
sure,
thankful for each and every one of them.
And so did you end up selling this company, or?
So Iridium kind of became the software development side of the refinery house.
Okay.
So when we rebranded and to be a more inclusive brand, it just went right.
Okay, yep. Got it. So it is it the same entity?
Not anymore. We've since thrown away the Iridium software company's entity itself. I mean, legitimate entity.
And then moved all the assets and
moved everything over to the refinery house, and now we are strictly the refinery house.
Interesting. Talk to me, about the decision to keep a business versus selling it. In your mind, through at this point, you've done that a couple times after these 3 companies.
Yeah, so for me, it's every situation is always unique and different. So I don't think there's a perfect formula on whether to keep it or not to keep it. I think looking at it and deciding on, is it preventing you from doing something else? Is it providing funds to let you do other things? Is it an annuity, or are you spending a significant amount of time in it on a daily basis? I think those are all big factors in terms of what you want to do next that will help you decide what to do then in terms of that scenario or situation. For me, I'm thankful for how the refinery house is going. I think it's going to kind of be our legacy brand, maybe not legacy business, but legacy brand. And I'm excited by the thought of keeping something a little longer than 16, 18 months. Can actually, yeah.
Very interesting. So, so you started another business, I believe, called GhostMe.
We did, yes. So GhostMe is a hyper local business, and by that I mean at the refinery house we're an agency, we're a retainer based agency, and so a lot of these smaller kind of mom and pop shop local businesses don't have the means to have an agency partner to help them scale and grow, and so GhostMe fills that need because it's a much lower touch, higher volume business, but still unlocks a lot of the tools and resources that any business needs to grow, really. And it starts with kind of two main things for us. One is business listing management. As you know, there's more than 40 local business listing platforms, and you can significantly increase your digital value for your business if you have everything kind of uniform across all platforms, and make sure that it's current. So we've kind of created a little process to take a business's information one time and then populate all 40 plus platforms with the exact same information, so that it helps give them a nice little lift and boost in the kind of Google My Business platform.
That's interesting. For the podcast, we use a platform called Anchor, which is similar. You put all the info about your podcast into it, you upload the audio, and then it automatically updates all the different podcasting
Very
platforms.
neat. So it goes to iTunes, it goes to
Google, Spotify.
Got
It goes to Spotify first because Spotify bought them for, I believe, $250 million this year.
Yes, drop in the bucket.
Drop in the bucket, exactly.
Spotify also acquired, speaking of podcasts, I believe they bought Gimlet as well,
They
didn't
did. And I think they announced it the same week, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow.
Two very different podcast plays, but I think that
Gimlet.
clearly it's an area that they're investing in heavily.
Yeah, did you ever listen to the Startup Podcast by Gimlet?
I had heard it once or twice. I didn't realize it was by Gimlet then.
Yeah, so the Startup Podcast is the story of starting Gimlet.
Okay.
So Adam records, conversations at the dinner table with his wife, telling her about how, their savings account is completely drained, but he's, putting in more money, kind of thing. So you get it was a really neat story to hear first person and get all the kind of behind the scenes stuff. And I was just so happy for him to hear that he eventually exited and did really well. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think Chris Sacca was their original investor.
Okay, interesting. So, GhostMe, are you continuing to invest in this business? Is it growing? Is it kind of turnkey? Where would you say that is at this point?
Still semi early stage. It's kind of cliche, but I always say if you're not growing, you're dying. So to leave something on autopilot or cruise control for me is a little scary. I like to keep fueling the fire or put the fire out, kind of thing. So GhostMe right now is in a stage of growth. We're rolling out right now pretty much totally to Charlotte local businesses, just so we have a really good feel on the local market here and what things are going to be very important, because kind of the part two of GhostMe is local paid search. And so we're able to go into companies like chiropractors, salons, massage places, all of these kind of cookie cutter businesses that will be able to scale these operations and processes to other cities that have the exact same kind of businesses.
Very interesting. And is there a separate staff for GhostMe, or do you use some of the staff from Refinery House? Or?
We're currently building a completely isolated sales staff for GhostMe. Right now, a couple of the media managers work for the Refinery House and GhostMe part-time.
Okay. Yeah, that's always sometimes challenging to figure out. I want to leverage some of the resources in one business, but then it also needs to be able to stand.
That's exactly right. Yes, that is quite the song and dance there. I'm definitely going to ask you about it at some point on how you've balanced it.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that, definitely. So you started another business that was OSHA compliance related?
Yeah,
where does that fit into the timeline?
It's called Accord. It came right before GhostMe, and I was very lucky. This is kind of a web of my close contacts. So Accord is an OSHA compliance business for small medical, dental, and veterinarian offices. And traditionally they managed all of their compliance through about an 8-inch 3-ring binder with just tons of worksheets that people had to go and initial on a daily basis or after they completed a task, or it's just a lot of overhead in managing this specific binder. So we took that and we put it online using a web-based application, and it's still in its infancy. The gentleman that approached me with the idea, he is actually one of my best friends, my attorney as well, and his mom had a business that does all of the 3-ring binders. So they saw kind of the writing on the wall and said, we want to be one of the first ones to go completely online. So they came to me and said, hey, we'd love to make you a partner in this business. Can you build it? And so that's how Robert and I got started in terms of building Accord.
That's great. Had you done anything in OSHA compliance before, or that was all Robert?
That was, I had never dipped a toe in OSHA compliance, but he is an OSHA and HIPAA compliance guru.
Okay. And is that in a state where it's growing, or is it still developing the product? Or
so Accord is, we're kind of in an extended beta period right now. So we have clients on that are using it, that are paying us to use the software and everything, but we have not pushed the pedal all the way to the floor in terms of scale. We believe that it's going to be probably one of our most successful businesses as of now, and we're really looking forward to pressing the go button in 4 days.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
While you're moving into a new office.
Yes, and actually I'll be out of town in New York City at VaynerMedia.
Interesting. I want to hear about that. So did you raise any outside money for these two businesses?
For GhostMe and Accord, they're both completely self-funded by me.
Okay. And same thing with Refinery House and
Refinery House, no, I actually raised a small initial round for Refinery House.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Through an angel investor, not a fund or anything like that. So yeah, we actually, when we decided that we were going to add the marketing agency side to the business, I knew that it would take me a few months to kind of get it going. So I went ahead and raised a round just to give us that initial seed layer of capital to be able to scale without being constrained.
That's great. So Accord on GhostMe and Refinery House, you're effectively running all three of those at this point.
At this point, yes.
And how do you typically, is it reactive where you're mostly just putting out whatever the current fire is, or are you able to be proactive and plan out where you want to spend your time?
Right now we're kind of in the transitional phase from going from reactive to hopefully proactive, and all three businesses really. We've added enough clients in the Refinery House to where we're have plenty of work to do, so it's keeping everyone busy there. And then in Accord and then GhostMe, right now they're pretty tame businesses right now. I'm waiting for something to catch on fire because it's been a few weeks without a late night phone call. So I know, exactly. I know one's coming at some point very soon, but we're transitioning to be more proactive. We're hiring some kind of manager level staff right now to help keep the fires extinguished.
Yeah, that's challenging, especially if the three are, I'm imagining that when things do catch on fire, it's, all three at once is probably the way that it usually will happen. Wow, that's great. Are there any synergies between the companies at this point, or?
So on GhostMe and the Refinery House, absolutely, because if we're approached by or recommended to a business that we can't help through the Refinery House, whether that be they have limited resources or just not a good fit overall, then generally we can help them through on GhostMe at least a little bit to get them some initial lift, get them pointed in the right direction, and be able to do a little bit of consulting through on GhostMe. And so that's been a neat thing to say, oh, well, this business, it's not a good fit, but over here we can help you. Okay. So yeah, the people have been generally very receptive to that.
So what type of corporate entity did you create? I'm assuming it's three separate ones.
They are three separate businesses.
And are they all the same type, all LLC? Or?
They're all LLC. We're gonna make the S election on the Refinery House here pretty soon.
Okay. Interesting. So you're an attorney's dream, creating all these entities. You mentioned Robert is a good friend of yours. Has he been there from day one, or have you had to work with outside attorneys otherwise?
So since the later Iridium days, Robert has been around, and so I can call him one of my very best friends, and he's been really just a huge blessing in terms of helping us navigate day-to-day stuff, high-level planning, company creation. I mean, you name it. He's been just a really key component of our overall growth.
That's great. It's very rare that you hear someone say they love their attorney.
I know, it's crazy. He probably will not love that I say this, but he's one of the attorneys that dislikes a lot of other attorneys. Okay. So he's a good one.
I can't say I blame him. I love my attorneys, by the way.
Yes, on the record.
Other than mine.
You deserve all 275 of your hourly dollars.
So at this point, you had exited you've exited 2 companies, and you've got 3 that you're actively running. How different was selling the second company? Obviously, you weren't selling to Foursquare the second time.
It was much quicker. It was much smaller. There was a lot less red tape to that exit than there was the first one. I can say that they were almost completely different in terms of no similarities other than company gone and cash this way. So I'm looking forward to the third.
Are you giving us some foreshadowing here?
Not officially, not for any one of the 3 that we're currently working on. I think just hopefully it's inevitable.
Sure. So Iridium transforms into the refinery house. Do you think of the founding of Iridium then as the founding of the refinery house, or was there a moment? Because for us with Level, I like to tell people that there were really 2 foundings. There was one where Chris and I started the company, and we called it Ladder Partners, and then there was another founding when we took on a third partner, and he helped us rebrand it to Level.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
And so for me, there's a group of founders. Even though Chris and I were the original, Matt came on. He was very much a founder because he helped us rebrand it and take it a different direction. Do you think of how do you think about that same dynamic? Because you actually had a different entity. We didn't. We just renamed it and completely shifted the branding and the focus of the company.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, that's very wise. For us, I think it's a little different. You can definitely trace our lineage back to Iridium just simply as an agency that provides a service for a customer. But really, when the Refinery House name was born, I immediately knew that I wanted this agency to be better than any other agency that I've ever owned or seen or been a part of. From day one, we've kind of really pushed the white glove experience to our customers. And so I think kind of January 1 this year, which is when the Refinery House officially launched, I think that's our only founding, really.
That's day one. And when do you think and where, and obviously it's not any one point, but were there some key learnings or things that happened that went into starting the Refinery House that you look back on and say, yeah, that was a core part of my education where I knew this is what had to happen?
Absolutely. I think just being in the tech space and kind of digital space in general, I saw that entrepreneurialism it's very hot right now, and so there's a lot of new businesses, a lot of new companies being started across the board, and I thought kind of what better way to use our experience in the space than to be able to provide a really high quality, top-notch service to a lot of these other entrepreneurs out there. And so that's kind of what I'm using to drive our culture as well as kind of our overall strategy forward through the Refinery House.
So are more of your clients startups then, or Fortune 500, or what's the mix of clients for Refinery House?
We have a vast array of clients right now. And, we have several Fortune 100 clients, and we also have several very local business clients. So really,
one that you've told me about, who we won't say their name, but is about as big as they come. I mean, it might be a Fortune 5 company.
Yeah, I think they're the largest in the world for what they do, is my understanding. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I know what a bitch it is to get through the procurement process at these type of organizations.
Yeah.
And just being able to get onto a procurement list, even though I believe you're doing it through a partner, But just being able to get through that process, that's a measure that you're there, because that means you can repeat it and you can do it over and over and over again at other massive companies.
Yeah, we're really excited that it went as smooth as it did, and we're thankful for the opportunity to work with them, of course, but it was a very interesting process nonetheless. We'll just say that.
I've been involved in a couple of those interesting processes.
Yes, yes. Yours is probably bigger than mine.
No, I don't know about that. But what types of technologies are you building things in these days?
All kinds, really. Right now, our kind of go-to stack is a mix between Node and React. We're using what we'd like to think are the most cutting edge, the most well-supported, and technologies that are also going to be here for a little while. They're not a fad technology or something like that our customers are not going to be able to get their application supported next year or the year after.
I'm doing some work with an Irish company, and I'll be interviewing their CEO on this podcast in the near future. And they've got something like half the committers on Node.js, so I've been more exposed to that community. And it's interesting because it is very cutting edge technology, and it's really been getting a lot of press, especially with the rise of serverless, and it's kind of a go-to platform for serverless. But just seeing some of the luminaries from within the community and the types of problems that they're solving, I think it's a very good balance of cutting edge but also supported.
Yeah, it kind of has that aura that it's going to be here for a little while. It's not something that's going to be gone tomorrow. But yeah, what are your thoughts on serverless technology? I'd love to get the kind of cliff notes from the man himself.
Well, so I think like anything, it can be a little bit overhyped, and I think that you can still do microservices well without serverless technology, but I do think, and I think it introduces challenges. Now, I think if you can overcome those challenges, it is a game-changing approach to building and deploying and managing applications. But I think it opens up a whole host of governance questions. I think that when the simplicity of deploying applications and just all it is really an endpoint and an invocation, and how do you charge that correctly? I don't know that companies are necessarily equipped to understand chargebacks on shared services in a serverless world. I think once you get through kind of the operational challenges of serverless, though, is where you really do start to drive value. I think if you take a step back and look at microservices, very, very hyped, I think overhyped. I think that people are driving tremendous value with microservices, but a lot of the companies that were coming to Level while I was still there in the day-to-day were not equipped as an organization to do microservices. They just aren't organizing cross-functional teams. Everything is geared towards a very waterfall approach to development. The teams are highly siloed, and it's just very difficult. And I think the same thing tends to apply with serverless. But if I'm building my own technology stack and I'm the CTO or influencing the decisions, I'm absolutely AWS, Lambda, serverless. But again, I don't know that it's necessarily right
very interesting
for everybody.
So conceptually, you really love it, but you think that know that there is a significant more amount of management overhead involved, or kind of understanding involved in updating the technology or continuing to use it.
And the metadata repositories to know, how do I call this service? How do I invoke this operation? I still think that there are challenges for some organizations to adopt that type of programming mindset, but those that can, I think, can drive some real innovation.
That's neat.
And again, I do think Node is a great example of a technology that enables that.
Yeah, so we're using Node, React, we're using Swift native on iOS. We prefer kind of vanilla native just at our shop versus kind of the React native kind of cross-platform, and we've just found that it works so much better. So our kind of standard protocol is build the application in one or the other, iOS or Android, refine it, get it right, and then build the other operating system's counterpart.
That was largely the conclusion that we came to. I do think there are some platforms that are cross-platform development. For those listening who don't know, developing an iOS application is wildly different from developing an Android application. One's written in Java and one's written in C. And so there's a decision made pretty early on. Do I go native, or vendors have built these tools that enable you to build an application once and then it handles the details under the hood. In fact, a friend of mine started a company that created a product called Titanium Studio that I would argue was the first really good example of doing just that. And I think you have to look at the type of application that you're building. If it's a very white glove service and it's customer facing, I think you're going to have to go native. And the reason that you would prefer to go with the build once and then deploy at multiple places is you're managing, in theory, one code base, and you don't have to hire two completely different coding skill sets, which some people can do both very well, but there are a lot who can't. But the advantage to doing the challenge with doing a multi-platform approach is that you inherently build to the lowest common denominator. So if one platform has a feature before the other platform that may be GPS related or location services related, or it may be some sort of integration into a payment system, or there's all sorts of things going on in these arms races. Right. You as the developer of React Native or whatever the tool is that's cross-platform, you have to go to the lowest common denominator, which means that you end up leaving features off. And so as foldable phones come out, you're going to have to go native to take advantage of a foldable phone.
Right.
But the advantage, I think, where we would advise clients on the cross-platform is when you think about enterprise applications that are being rolled out, and especially when you're doing almost a lift and shift off of a green screen technology or a Windows MFC application or a VB6 application, and you say, I need to just get this on to a tablet as quickly as I can. Yeah. And these are enterprise users who don't care what it looks like, they don't care what it feels like, but
it's all utility at that point.
But I don't think you're ever going to see the next Instagram or Uber built
cross-platform.
On cross-platform.
I would concur with that.
Yeah. Although React Native is fantastic technology. I have heard the argument made that the problem with these cross-platforms is also that when updates are made to the underlying operating system, they may be slower to respond. And I don't know how true that is. I haven't seen any data on that. My reaction is the same thing happens in native, though. A new SDK gets released.
Comes out, you got to update it.
You've got to update it too. Exactly. And so you're not you might control your own destiny a little bit, but I've got to imagine these cross-platform development paradigms have access to the same, they have the same early access to the new APIs, and so they should be rolling it out and giving you enough time to make whatever changes you need to make to your code base.
Right, that makes sense. No, that's well thought out there.
Very, very interesting. Are there any other key technologies for you? I take it a lot of AWS and Azure.
A lot of AWS, no Azure at all.
No Azure, interesting.
Yeah, I'm starting to dip my toes into Google Cloud a little bit just to check it out. I understand that it's a good bit cheaper than AWS, but I'm waiting to look at the entire kind of feature set and do some research myself before I make the decision that we're gonna do anything on Google Cloud.
Okay.
But yeah, right now it's...
So if your clients ask you, we need to be on Azure, what is the answer? Is the answer depends on how big you are to how much?
That is exactly the answer right now, because our answer would be, well, we currently don't have anything on Azure, so you would be the first, and you would essentially have to pay for our education sort of on it. Yeah, I drink the...
You're a lot more honest than I am as a consultant. I've done thousands of Azure deployments.
All over the world, everywhere, in all the availability zones. No, I think for us, it's just, I would really want to understand why they need to stick to Azure before I would endorse that decision. And it's not because Azure is a bad platform or a bad service. It's just we know AWS so well at this point that it's hard for us to think about committing to another cloud service.
And are most of your clients going cloud native with AWS, or are they looking to be cloud agnostic and deployed on AWS?
So far, it really hasn't been a huge issue on which service they use or where they land. So we just kind of say AWS is the best, and that's what we're going to build it on. So.
Okay, that's great.
Now, Jeff Bezos, if you're listening, AWS is the best, no matter what they all say.
So, at the current scale that you've got Refinery House, or kind of where you are right now, what's the biggest challenge? What's keeping you up at night? What do you feel like I've got to get this right?
We've focused so much on our delivery that, you know, if something goes wrong or if something isn't perfect in terms with an interaction with a client for us, whether I'm CC'd on an email and I would have done something a little bit differently than someone on my team did, that's kind of the stuff that keeps me up at night. And I think that can all be boiled back down to company culture. And so, like I said, I'm 27 and I don't have a ton of experience in just the general company culture realm. I've always worked for myself, or you know, haven't been involved in a large company that has really great culture to be saturated in and learn from that. So I would say right now my biggest challenge is consistent company culture and what that looks like. A lot of the people that work with me are my age or older. And so making sure that I'm balancing leadership and authority with also kind of understanding that they're reporting to someone who's significantly younger than they are. So that is kind of my biggest challenge, and one of the things that I'm hoping to solve with this week's trip to VaynerMedia.
Excellent. Well, I've done some work with a group out of the UK that I really admire, and they've been in business for a while and been very successful at growing multiple digital businesses. They own a cricket team, and so very successful group. And they have a presentation that I saw in New York probably 4 or 5 months ago where they talk about company culture, and they had a lot of really good material in there, but there were a couple of things that stuck out to me. One of the things they said, which is almost cliche but it bears repeating, is that company culture is really, when you boil it down, it's the way people behave when there isn't a policy on something. And if you think about it, your policies can't be so prescriptive to cover everything. Right. So if you give people a set of guiding principles and this is how they behave, and they're going to have it whether it's good or bad, it's going to exist. It's just if it's well thought out and the right fit, then they're going to behave the right way. And they also said, which I had not heard anywhere else yet, I still haven't yet, is that corporate culture is in the long run is the only sustainable advantage for any company in any industry, period.
I like that a lot, and it's, when you say it, it's blatantly obvious to me, but I concur very much so. That it reminds me a little bit of something that my dad taught me when I was a lot younger. Was, he said, you know, I was kind of in the learning manners age and going to cotillion in 6th grade and all of that stuff, and he was, you know, he kind of told me that you can have great manners in a public and social setting, but your kind of actual manner rubric is how you perform when you're alone. If there's no one sitting across from you at the table, do you still chew with your mouth closed? Do you you know, and still act proper and all of that? And so
same exact concept.
That's a very cool, neat concept. That's something that stuck with me for a long time, so I hope I'll be able to tie it in and sow those seeds in the Refinery House.
Well, we built up what I think is a pretty strong and enduring culture at Level, and also before that at Amentra. And you know, I don't think that there's any one guideline that I think applies to every company, but I do think that being able to think about what type of company you want to be, and my guess is, given the industry that you're in, and certainly for Amentra and for Level it was this way, you want a company that's dynamic and can stay on top of the technology and on top of the way that companies are driving value through building these digital products and then marketing and selling them, which is chaotic as fuck. Look at the commit logs on Node. Look at how quickly everything changes in the React world. Look at how quickly everything around you changes. And that's difficult for people, even for 25-year-olds, 22-year-olds coming out of college. The constant change, it's difficult. I don't care how ADD you are and how quickly you're able to learn new technology, it can be challenging. And when you think about the culture, to me, you need to start with, okay, we need to embrace this rapid change. And again, I don't think this applies to this doesn't apply to a bank the way that it does to a tech company.
Sure.
But then, if I change everything, then how can I have a culture? Because it's constantly changing, and then how can I give guidelines around that? And so what I saw work very well in both companies was really sitting down and defining as a team, what are the things that can't change? And if you start from that, and then you say, now these are our core values, and these are never going to change. Everything else can change, and I'm comfortable.
It's kind of your foundation that you build everything else on top of. I really like that. That's great. What would you say are kind of like, if you're going to start a new business tomorrow, what are your top 3 core principles that you would try and instill in that business?
So for me, the number one is intellectual curiosity. I just want to be around humans in my personal life and in corporate life that are intellectually curious, and I don't care what they're intellectually curious about. When I would interview people at level, tell me what you're into. You know, what do you really like? And if they could go deep on something, I don't care what it was, then I think that that's the kind of mindset that is going to do well around me, because the companies I build, I want to learn. I want to keep changing things. I want to keep pushing the envelope. And if you aren't curious about what things are, you're not going to be able to do that.
In your interviews, did you have any, this is a little off topic here, but in your interviews, did you have any like your own go-to interview questions that you would kind of throw out there to see if they would take the...
Yeah, it would depend on the level of the interview. So if I was doing a tech interview, my go-to questions, I had all sorts of technical questions about Java, .NET, C#. And I was always, if somebody was an asshole, I would always throw them off with explain the volatile keyword in Java, and then compare and contrast that with volatile in C++.
Oh my God.
But I only broke that out for a couple assholes.
I'm glad you're not interviewing me, because I have no idea what
but I don't put a lot of stock in technical interviews. I think most people fuck that process up and say no to good candidates.
What about kind of conceptual interviews?
But conceptual interviews, my favorite question of all time was, and I had 2 different frameworks I would ask it within, but would be to walk somebody through a large transformation project and get them into the details of what we're doing, and then have the client throw a curveball. So in one case, we're standing up a turnkey VoIP product for a company that had never sold in the retail VoIP industry before. They contract with us to come in, and this is back in the Inventure days. They want to have this very complex integration done to build this product. They didn't understand the complexity of the integration. They bought an integration platform. The vendor said, you guys are crazy. Like this, you need to talk to Inventra, they'll figure it out. And so I was the project lead on this project. And we figured out, and it was painful. It was the most painful project I've ever been on. And I've been on some bad ones. This one was wildly painful. And we get probably 7 or 8 months into the project, and we finally got the product working. And at this point, we realized there's inventory that needs to be shipped. And we had always been told that we were going to use UPS. So we built an integration into UPS's logistics as a service platform. And then we finally got an interview with someone from the CFO's office, and we say, okay, where do we store this inventory data? And they're like, well, we've never sold inventory before.
Oh wow.
Well,
okay.
So I like this. So you can see I like this because I'm going through a real world problem with the person that I'm interviewing, making sure that they follow, making sure that they ask questions, because I'm going to explain things that don't have enough info. And to be a good consultant, you need to be able to ask the right questions.
Right.
But this is where I really, really like to see how they behave, because I say, what do you do now? If you're in my shoes as the project lead, and you find out there is no inventory system, and there is no right answer. I just want to hear them think through what questions do they ask. Yeah. But back to your original question. So I think intellectual curiosity is the first one, and I think in that example, an intellectually curious person is going to ask me questions. They're going to say, I'm going to ask questions of the person that I'm talking to. So I think that those are important. I think excellence as a habit is very important.
Love that.
For people. I think that just if you're going to do anything that you deliver to somebody else, it needs to be as good as you can make it. And people who take that kind of professional pride, I think, tend to do very well. And then you're splitting hairs between how important each of these is, but it's also incredibly important to me to have an open mind. I hate nothing more than sitting down with a developer who's 30 IQ points higher than I am and has done way more than I have, but who can't be open-minded and look at a problem and say, hey, maybe I need to rethink the way I'm thinking about this. I don't care. You can't know everything. You can't be smarter than everybody on everything, and you can't operate unless you're willing to to learn from others. So those are probably the three most important. But there's others that I would rank up there as well.
No, I'm just thankful that you're not like the Elon Musk interviewer. You know, one of his favorite questions is, if you are standing at a singular point on the planet and you walk a mile south, a mile west, and a mile north, you're right back where you're standing. Where are you?
I've heard this one and I don't remember the answer anymore, but
it's either the North or the South Pole.
Got it,
but
yeah.
yeah, you know, he does all those kinds of stuff. So that's great to hear kind of your general philosophy on corporate culture.
Sure. Yeah. I my first company out of undergrad, they asked those kind of questions, and it was nerve-wracking. Luckily, I got enough of them right to pass through. But it was an interesting interview process for sure. But I told my people this all the time: you're gonna fuck up an interview,
right?
And especially, we operated a business in Australia, one in Singapore, and one in the UK as well. And in those cases, it's pretty hard to fire people. Operating a business in North Carolina, I'd rather err on the side of caution as long as someone has done some interesting things, and if they aren't good, then you let them go. I think that the biggest challenge we have with technology folks is that they get hung up on things that don't really matter at times, and you end up screening out bad candidates more often than you do screening out good candidates more often than bad.
I read an article actually that kind of analyzed the United States government's hiring processes for software engineers, and they said that they will never be on par with the Russians or the Chinese because we have a zero drug policy.
Wow.
And there are so many brilliant engineers and stuff that simply just smoke pot or whatever, and that's an absolute no-go at the United States federal government. So we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot there because we can't move past that one simple thing.
We certainly have a lot of unforced errors for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
that definitely seems like one of them. I think that the other thing is when you look at a place like Singapore, like and I don't recall the exact numbers,
but running a business in Singapore.
Well, we had a guy who was awesome in Melbourne who had worked with us before running that business, and then we gave him a pile of cash to go build the team that he needed to build. Then he started the business in Singapore because he was doing a lot of business in Singapore, and it just became a lot more cost effective. But their government is fascinating, very, very well run city. It's a city state. It's much easier to run a city than it is to run a country, obviously.
Yep.
But they take the role of public servant very seriously, and they pay them commensurate with what they would make. And so
what a concept.
Yeah. So if you want to get the best voice engineer to come work for the U.S. government, but you're going to lump him into G2 or G3 or whatever their scale is, and then he goes and talks to Google and is offered more than a starting pitcher for the Cubs would make.
Exactly.
You're going to have trouble finding the best talent. And from what I understand, Singapore realizes this, and as a result, people take pride in going and getting government jobs. And I think when someone takes pride in what they're doing, they do better work. I don't care what it is. You could be a sweeper at McDonald's, and if you take pride in it, you're going to be better.
The best sweeper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly right. So what you're saying is the Singaporean government has good corporate culture.
From what I've heard.
That's great.
Yeah,
I love hearing that. I know that that littering is still illegal over there, and so there's one Singapore night F1 race, and they have to get special permission from the governor to throw the tearaways of their visors on the track.
Oh wow!
So otherwise, it was a huge big deal. So we switched over to Noah's Mill. What do you think? You've had a couple of sips of it there. Kind of compare, contrast to the CYPB white bottle.
It's also very good. It's not as good. It's clearly a different class of bourbon, but I like this one as well. I could see this being a daily driver for sure.
Yeah, it's got a nice bite to it.
Are you much into rye whiskeys at all? Or?
I am. Yeah. Next podcast we'll do rye only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I actually just picked up two new rye bottles last week that I think are going to be pretty fantastic. So,
awesome.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I've got a very good friend, Tim Cheadle, who's really into bourbon, and I keep meaning to ask him what his thoughts are on rye. He's got a bourbon collection that's absurd, and he goes out with a group of friends and buys a barrel, I think, every year.
Oh wow!
With the group.
Sure. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not that into it, but I do appreciate a good whiskey, and this certainly is.
Yeah.
Is a good one.
We might have to go do the bourbon trail together at some point.
We may have to do that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about it a little bit. There's two very different parts of the refinery house. Why do you have them both under the same roof? I mean, clearly you don't mind starting multiple companies, so you could have had them as two companies, but why
Sure.
did you?
Yeah, I think we're hoping that the benefits of one business kind of puts out the fires that the other business causes, meaning software development is great, margins are good if you're good at it and you can manage the project well. But one of the things is that most software development projects have is a beginning and an end, and it's not kind of recurring and it's not never ending, right? So my thought was marrying the two businesses together would allow for the marketing side's recurring retained revenue to support the day-to-day resource need that the entire business has, and then allow the kind of software development projects to layer on top of that, really, and kind of that be our in the black kind of profit there. So that was the original thought behind combining them and making them two very close businesses.
So you're saying the ongoing care and feeding of a product doesn't die. I mean, it could be killed, but generally speaking, it doesn't end the way a project does. It
Sure, and for us, yeah, that's exactly right. But on the software side, it's been tough for us to break into the kind of ongoing support as much as it has to land the one-off projects. And so instead of focusing my time on building out the support side of our business, I just went ahead and added the marketing agency, because I think there's a significant amount of potential there as well. And I wanted just to simplify my life and have one brand that I could refer to constantly versus multiple.
It's interesting because we started out in app dev, and then one of our very early employees said he got really frustrated because we would get work that was done by a design agency and for our client, and then we'd go to build it, and it wasn't designed to be built. It was designed to look good as a design, and so he wanted to create a design agency inside of an app dev shop.
Right.
And one of the things he talked a lot about that I think hits on what you're talking about is he wanted to shift the mindset away from projects to products, and he liked to talk about how you design a product, you build it, you measure it, and then you refine it, and then you redesign it, and it's an ongoing thing. And having the agency and going into more of the marketing and the advertising, really the marketing part, that is more and more intertwined with the app dev, because you have to be able to measure, you have to have the metrics, and they need to be built into the product itself. And so it creates a nice virtuous cycle over time.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, that's literally why we named it the Refinery House, because it's kind of this ongoing cycle of build a product, send it over to the marketing side, put it out in the marketplace, get feedback on it, be able to refine it on the software side, and then run it back through the marketing side.
That's
just
great.
kind of rinse and repeat that cycle over and over and over again until
Now,
you end up with that great
do you do much cross-selling between the two businesses?
I do,
Okay.
yeah.
And do you lead with one more often than the other, or do you prefer to lead with one?
Not necessarily one over the other. I think a lot of our business has come through the software side, and then we inevitably market their product. But I've been so focused on scaling the marketing side over the past few months that most of our new business is coming in through there and then being supported by the software side.
So for the clients that come in on the marketing side versus the clients that tend to come in on the development side, are they very different, or is it just random?
Pretty different. We have a longer, healthier software development agency than we do digital marketing agency. So our clients that come in through the software side are generally significantly larger than our marketing only clients. And so that's one thing that I'm working on, trying to balance or to get our marketing clients to be our equivalent to our software clients.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about this before, but are your employees mostly siloed between one side and the other? Are you starting to see more crossover as it evolves?
There's a lot of sharing going on right now. Like a lot of our design team does. They're not siloed. They go back and forth between UI UX and then just general graphic and stuff like that. We tend to stay away from simple print and stuff like that kind of design, because that's not necessarily product based. But everyone else, in terms of our engineers, they're very siloed. They don't overlap at all. I overlap. Some of our other C-suite people overlap, but anyone kind of below that doesn't.
Interesting. So do you have a shared bench between the two, or are you managing two different benches when you think about the billable resources?
We don't have a bench on the marketing side. Everyone over there is completely in-house, and we're actually at a great run rate right now in terms of resources that we have and resources that we need. It's been really strange. I feel like we haven't strayed too far in one direction or the other in terms of waste or drought. So so far everything's going well over there. Right now on the software side, we have a pretty large bench of engineers, and we've enjoyed that because we can go into pretty much any meeting and say, yes, we can build this and we can start really soon.
Yeah.
And that's been able to win us more business than a lot of other things have.
It's interesting, when we were with Amentra, we were managing largely one bench. You can train a .NET developer to do Java and vice versa, because those were the two technologies that we were developing. And at Level, one of the things I struggled with early on, when we were first just doing pure app dev, you're managing one bench. But then we added DevOps, which is a fairly distinct skill set. We generally are, and at least when I was there, we were selling a lot more on the dev side of the DevOps, but you're still talking about more of an infrastructure skill set or network configuration or the operations side of the house. But that was fairly manageable. Then we started doing payment strategy work, which is completely different. And those guys will never write a line of Java code in their life. They'll never set up a GitHub repository.
Right.
But the people on, the developers are never going to go learn the difference between all of the different payment networks, or who all the players are in the space, or how to put a proper PowerPoint presentation together, because it is an art. I learned from some of the best in the business at Level. Completely distinct skill set. Then you get into design, and all of our designers could code, but it was, at a minimum, they could do HTML code and some JavaScript.
Just a little light front-end work.
But not necessarily someone that you're going to put on configuring JMS queues for a payment processing engine for a large,
It's a completely different DNA.
Super regional bank. And even within development, native mobile developers tend to focus on that and not go write Node.js code or go write some of the others. So we were really managing a lot of different benches, and there definitely was a point where, number one, we had a lot of pain tolerance in the company. We were all comfortable with selling things that we might not know.
We could figure it out.
But we'll figure it out.
Right.
We were very confident that we could
That kind of
always
ties
deliver.
back to your intellectual curiosity in corporate culture. That's
exactly.
great.
And our head of sales used to always say, never confuse sales with delivery. Like, sell it and figure out how to deliver it later. And,
like that.
And now, obviously, you can get into some reputational ruin if you go too far with it, but we were able to strike a good balance there. But we even though we had the pain tolerance to do that and power through, it definitely got easier at a certain point. I can't look back and say it was 120 people or 160 or what, but and part of the problem is the capabilities were constantly evolving too. Just as we would grow, we would also say, okay, now we're going to start a media and publishing practice, and now you've added another bench.
New business line, that you need to stack resource up for,
Yeah, exactly. And but do you think will you hit a point, do you think, where, number one, you need to carry a bench on the digital agency side and the marketing side? And if you do you think there's a point where you've hit the right size, where you've balanced the needs of having the bench capacity with running lean and being profitable?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think overall, I'm kind of curious just to see how this goes and how inevitably it scales and what our needs look like. I don't know what our needs are going to look like, and so I don't know if we'll need a bench, because we're in such infancy on that side of the business that, yes, we actually just last week crossed cash flow positive on that side of the business, which was a great milestone for us. But in terms of what the future holds, and I just don't know, to be really honest. I think I'm kind of like the take it day by day and just be ready to adapt, or just be agile enough to handle anything that comes across the desk. That
I call it keeping your head on your shoulder. I think back to high school football, where like wide stance, down, prone and ready, and just keep your head looking around.
Yep, just on a swivel. That's exactly right. That's how I pretty much go into my office every day.
So one thing that's fascinating to me about your business, and I don't know the best way to describe this, so if it doesn't make sense right away, we'll keep poking at it until we figure out what I'm trying to say. I think you probably get a ton of mileage eating your own dog food with the marketing service, it's also a revenue generator, and I compare it to AWS for Amazon. Amazon makes money off of AWS, but they clearly get a lot of advantage in their other businesses. And I think that is, when you look at businesses throughout time, there's always seems like there's very often a strong tendency to vertically integrate. So you would see auto manufacturers go buy farms for the cows for their leather, and then they'd go buy a manufacturer of a window machine, or you're just a vertically integrated supply chain. And and the rationale there is often, I want to say, cut costs and I can control it better. And then the challenge seems, and again, I've never worked at an automotive company, but from just the literature I've read in other industries as well, it seems like what ends up happening is your parts of your supply chain become complacent because they have a captive audience in GM. So although GM has more control over Delphi and their radios, Delphi isn't selling against Alpine or Clarion or Pioneer or anybody who's driving innovation, selling to everybody. With Amazon, in their case, AWS, they're selling to other customers as well, and so you get a vertically integrated supply chain that's forged in the marketplace.
That's a great way of putting that.
And so, does that factor in? Am I right about that? Do you see some advantages from that? And are there other areas of things that you see that you could do the same thing where you create? Because Amazon hasn't just done it in AWS; they've done fulfillment, they've done storefront, they've done logistics now.
It's insane in terms of his integration plan, if you will, or his integration strategy. But for us, we're young enough on that side of the business that we foresee us leveraging our resources to our benefit, but we haven't tapped it just yet. Now we're doing kind of the basics. We have a website, of course, Instagram account, kind of the standard protocol, all of the things that that we recommend our clients have, we do currently for ourselves, just because I think that's ridiculous when you recommend something to someone but you've never done it yourself, or self-practice as a company, but we have not dipped into, okay, let's pretend the refinery house is an external account, let's go market the refinery house. We haven't gotten to that point yet in terms of maturation, because we're just kind of getting our feet set. We're kind of in that position, the agile ready position, and we've just sort of gotten there. We've kind of been just internal building out stuff, processes, making sure that delivery is great while we're remodeling the office, while we're, there hasn't been too much time for us to look internally and say, okay, let's go market ourselves now. Historically, in all of my businesses, I didn't have an Instagram account myself until maybe 2016, I think. So,
how non-millennial of you,
right? Exactly. Thank you. Yes. I also sent all my thank you notes on a typewriter. So,
I saw that.
But
that was the second note I received in the past week from a millennial, handwritten note like that. It was awesome to see.
That's great.
Some things are coming back.
They're coming back around. The hipsters are really making their impression on today's culture. But overall, we haven't really fully tapped our agency side for our own benefit yet. So I'll circle back up with you and let you know how much mileage I get out of our own team when it really starts to happen.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you go about marketing. Talk about all the different aspects, both the branding, but then also how do you convert from marketing and brand awareness to actual intent to purchase to purchasing. And I don't think when we were your size that we did a very good job of that at all, but we also didn't own a digital agency. So I'm curious where you guys are along that process.
No, that's a very fair question. I think for us, this is my first business where I feel like I have more of a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I just said that I'm kind of day by day, take it and just see how it comes. But for the first time, I feel like my feet are really set. I'm looking at this brand as a legacy brand and forward for many years, not just forward to an exit. So we're doing things way more intentionally than we've ever done in terms of my close corporate team. So in terms of delivery, I mean, we're going all the way down to preparing each meeting agenda on a really nice looking deck or document for our clients, just so that everything is completely spoon fed to them and they feel like there's no barrier to entry to working with us. We kind of are full service and we do everything.
So that's really sales enablement. You give these to your sales team. They can overcome objections. They can. Okay,
yes, that's
great.
exactly right. So it's kind of one of our things that we do is everything that we touch or push to a client has been reviewed multiple times and it's perfectly polished. And so I think, kind of back to your question, conceptually for us, in my earlier businesses, I never knew what was going to happen, and I never really had a plan. I was just kind of, okay, I see an opportunity, let me solve that problem for someone and see what happens. And now it's like we're solving problems for our clients, but I'm also looking at this as we just need to maintain incredible service quality. And so we're being super intentional in planning things for a little bit longer term to maximize our overall client experience. And I think that's going to allow us our client retention is going to be significantly higher than it is with other agencies. There's a lot of millennial agencies, as I'm calling them, popping up right now that are they're very fast and agile and loud and all of this stuff, but they're less people focused. So that's kind of one of our core principles is we're a people first company. So I think it's all about client experience and retention for us. I think in terms of new marketing and new business, historically I've not spent a single dollar marketing ourselves. It's always been word of mouth through my network or through our employees' networks or my family's network or whoever. So I've just kind of leveraged close contacts, but this is the first time where we are currently working on our own strategy to go after the clients that we've identified that we'd really like to work with.
That's great. It's funny when you think about building that business for the long term as opposed to exiting it. I think it was a private equity guy who told me, and I'll butcher this, but I'll give it a shot. That's never stopped me before. Build a business that you want to own forever, and you probably won't have to own it forever.
Wow, yeah, that's a very wise statement. You didn't butcher that at all. That hit home pretty good there.
Yeah, and it's a great guideline. Whether you keep the business or sell it, the company buying it is going to appreciate that you built it the right way.
That's exactly right. Love that.
So, do you do much in terms of content? I know you said you're not spending money on marketing, but do you these days? And one of our millennial leaders at Level really taught me this about the role that content played in our marketing, because we did invest very heavily eventually in it, and we did eventually get it right, largely because of this particular younger leader within the company. But how do you view content today? Are you encouraging folks to blog or speak at events? Or
my saying is content is king. I think the more content the better, and not necessarily longer form, but frequency of content.
Sure.
Keeps you top of mind, not only in search engines but also people's brains as well. But for us, to me, quality content wins over volume of content. I would much rather have a well-written piece or a great-looking account or something than just tons of stuff that's meh, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's my prescription to our clients is I want to do as much content production as we possibly can, so long as it still passes our quality standards.
I think that's a great strategy, and we learned a lot of lessons, things we did wrong or right. And one of the challenges we had was we got very good, I felt, at targeting content to the right buyer persona and getting it in front of them at the right time, and then tracking it, and then turning that into making a phone call. And because we got so good at that, we started maybe turning a blind eye, not a blind eye, but we just had a very different viewpoint on some of that other longer tail engagement that you're talking about. We had a guy who would write 15-page blog posts that I'm a fairly technical guy, and it was hard for me to get through. He was brilliant, but it was fairly hard to get through. And the editors would push back on it and say, this doesn't meet our content guidelines. And my argument was always, well, then let's not target it through our engine. Don't publish it on social media. Don't push it through our campaign manager. But let it sit out there, because the search engines will find it. Yeah, and you would see vendors would pick up on these articles sometimes 3 or 4 months later and tweet it, and then you'd get 10,000 reads the next day.
That's brilliant.
And it's hard because you need to balance the two, the long tail engagement with the I'm going to actually make a sale off of this.
Sure, and for me, it's not necessarily about length or like technicality. It's just generally, is it well written?
Yep.
Like, so for that document that you speak of, the 15-page, it's like, okay, do I look at it? Does it make technical sense? Yes. All right, let's put it out there then and see what happens.
Exactly. I'm not going to send it to a CEO.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. So.
How do you balance internal projects versus billable work?
Oh, that is such a great question, and one that I'd like to hear your thoughts on too.
Sure.
For us, it is, I have a 90-day rule.
Okay.
So a new internal project, if it can't be close to standing on its own in 90 days.
That's a great rule. I've never thought of it that way.
Then I don't think that it's a worthwhile project or business. And that's not only from simply conceptually, like, is it going to gross revenue in 90 days? It's more like, if people are bought in enough on the idea, they will make something happen in 90 days. And if they don't, they're not bought in on enough. And I'm at a point in my career where I don't have the capacity to be the guy on the new project. And so I create a team and I allow them to have a 90-day runway to use our own internal resources, within reason, of course. And if they can make something happen in 90 days, good, we'll keep going. If they can't, then we're going to shut that one down and move to something else.
Yeah, I think the bigger problem I always had, and I love the 90-day guideline, I think that's brilliant, but the bigger problem we had was that we would have projects that we knew could improve, or we believed, we never know, but we believed could improve the company.
Yeah.
And people would get gung-ho about it, and then we'd put them on it. And then the minute the almighty dollar calls, like, you pull them off and you've lost all the momentum.
That's exactly right.
On the internal project. And so I wish I could say that we did a particularly good job with it. I think one of the things that we did get better about was, if we were using internal resources for things, that we would be better served going and hiring a $50 or $60 or $70,000 web developer. We would just go do it, because what ends up happening is you take somebody that you're paying $150,000 a year and you have them work on this side project.
It's ROI negative.
Then it's ROI negative, and they could be out billing at a couple, in your case, $1,000 an hour maybe. But the thought there is, well, it's not an incremental dollar, and I'm not making an overhead higher. But the internal systems got so complex for us by the time I was.
You needed those $150,000 guys.
We wanted them billing, but then we wanted to go hire the younger people and less experienced to go do the internal systems.
Love that.
But again, even you say it's $60,000, it's not as expensive as the $150,000 resource, but they're never going to bill. You're saying this is all you're going to work on is Salesforce,
expense. It's not there's no income received off of that. No. Yeah. So at the refinery house, we love using branded terms. So I called something the shed. There's actually an Easter egg on our website to find the shed, and I'm not going to disclose its location.
I'm going to go find it and put it in the show notes.
Please. Yes. So at the shed, each employee is required to go to the shed once a quarter to come up with creative idea that they would like to pursue with our own internal resources. And then we kind of go around the table and we say, okay, whose quarterly project are we going to allow them to build out?
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, yeah, we just kind of encourage that ongoing creativity, curiosity. Goes back to one of your founding principles as well, which I think is really great. But so for us, it's a requirement to go once a quarter. think of something on your own, present it to the rest of the team, and see if it's worth pursuing.
I like that a lot. We didn't do enough of that, I don't think. Because again, you get so caught up in the billable work and the sales work.
Sure. So it's an interesting thing for me to be focused on that kind of stuff, because normally I definitely would not be. I'm a revenue fiend,
Yep.
and now being hardened over the last few years to be that revenue fiend, it's been an interesting thing for me to sit back and say, yes, this project is probably not going to make me a single dollar, but I believe that the value of the project is actually significantly higher than a customer's $15,000 XYZ project.
Absolutely.
It's like I think we're really valuing that curiosity and creativity ongoing.
One of the things we did, because we had some people who said we want to just create products, and I'm all for that. And one of the great success stories out of the town where I'm from in Washington, D.C. is a company called Appy, and I'm going to interview one of the guys that is named on a couple of their patents and started a services business that only does Appy. And so I'm fascinated by them. They started as a consulting company and then ultimately built a product that they've now IPO'd on.
Wow.
It's a fantastic success story, and everybody sees those and wants to go build products, because in theory consultants see things that nobody else sees, because you're seeing way more things and you see them faster.
Very diverse.
I always gave the guidance to folks, look, if you want to work on something that you think might be a product, that's great. And I didn't say you have 90 days to do it, but I said, first off, like, build it on GitHub, set it up as a public project if you're comfortable with it being open source for right now, and then blog about the process, because we'll get value from the blog. We'll promote it if it's well written enough and fits into our marketing strategy. Like that. But then you come back and you read the blog, so we're getting some brand awareness out of it. Then if it's useful and enough people are reading it and downloading it on GitHub and that sort of thing, then treat it as a framework for selling consulting projects. So let's create a productized consulting offering focused on this quote unquote product. Yeah. And then if you have enough success with that, then let's talk about making it a product that companies are paying for. And we didn't, for full disclosure, we never created one product with that methodology, but that was my way.
I like that
of
de-risking
a lot. It's like, let's get the value that we can, but let's give you the creative outlet that you need. And the reality is, you're going to learn so much in doing that you become more valuable as a consultant, was always my theory.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think my sort of closeted hope is that in building something new, you have to think about a lot more stuff outside of just your role in that specific project. There's a huge difference between being a role inside of a project and being the project owner.
Oh, huge.
And so to me, it's very helpful for them to have context on what I deal with on a daily basis versus kind of their specific role. Okay, I know that I need to do these 10 things today and then I'm good to go. And to me, it's you kind of mold them into being more agile, being more aware. And
well, I think the empathy they have for the business owner at that point. I like to give the example, the first project I did when I moved to Charlotte was with Family Dollar, and we were doing a rollout. We were doing part of a rollout for them of a new point of sale system, and then what we billed them for that work might have been $2 million, but I want to say that the total cost of ownership for the overall product rollout was north of $180 million. So it isn't just the build. Like, we get caught up in the build as the consultants, but the product owner is thinking about all of these other things that go to roll out to 7,000 stores.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. So that's great.
That's great. Well, what type of overhead do you have in place at this point?
In terms of dollars per month? Or?
Well, no, just the roles that you would call, like, you're probably overhead. You're probably not a billable resource at this point.
Yep.
And then do you have any sales, marketing, accounting?
Not too many right now. Like, they're kind of all, multidisciplinary in terms of what they can do. I encourage all of my employees to be salesmen and not in the sleazy used car salesman way, but just, I think if we're building a business that we're all proud of, inevitably everyone becomes a salesman for your business. And so that's our current strategy in terms of sales. Now, I'm 80% focused on new business, and to me that means not only managing our internal assets to be ready to support that new business, and also the way that we look externally from a digital landscape perspective. I mean, all of those things factor into our ability to go get new business.
So do you have anybody that's dedicated sales or marketing other
don't.
than you? Because what you just described to me are classic sales and marketing. What about from an accounting perspective? Do you outsource all the invoicing activities, or do you do that yourself? I did it myself when I was at the size where you are right now.
Funnily enough, I've been doing it ourselves, kind of internally shared. If your client that you own does something, you go and you create the invoice in QuickBooks and dispatch it to them, and then you kind of CC our controller, but our contract controller. Actually, funnily enough, I'm bringing on my mom on board next week to become kind of our interim QuickBooks manager, accounting kind of office manager, human being. Yeah, so I can't think of anyone more trustworthy and I mean, she is on top of it. I can tell you that from childhood experience. So I'm excited to bring her on to kind of help us. Right now, it doesn't make sense for us to go hire a $150,000 a year CFO to kind of manage both sides of the business. We had a contract CFO for a little while, but now I think for us, we're at a place where common sense and then just managing day-to-day invoicing and accounting is all we really need to get us to the next level.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Have you thought ahead? Obviously, your mom is your next overhead investment, but because that's an overhead role.
Sure.
But have you thought beyond that? Do you think there comes a point where you need to hire dedicated sales or marketing or administrative or other HR, that type of thing?
Yes. So I'm trying to kick that can down the road as far as possible in terms of HR or dedicated non-revenue producing asset in terms of a marketing person or something like that. I would say though that our next hire for me selfishly is someone that lands in the account management / executive assistant role and just can support me through day-to-day activity. We're getting to the point where I can, in a week, in an 80-hour work week, I can have 40 to 50 hours worth of meetings, and conference calls and stuff like that. And so my overall production has significantly decreased the larger we've gotten, and so I'm avidly looking and seeking for someone who can help me increase my office's production specifically.
Absolutely. And I would encourage you, because that's not normally a high-priced resource.
That was my next question is, how many have you had, and
so
what are your experiences, and what's the kind of type of person that you would go after now, having been through kind of several?
Yeah, so I would, as I build the Defiance brand, and there's more to it than this podcast, this is just the content marketing piece of what I'm doing with that, and then some investments that I've been making. When I get really serious about building it, and there's a couple of things that are going to trigger that, one of the first things I'm going to do is hire an executive assistant. Now, I won't think of this person as helping with account management. I think account management is the most important thing that any company can do. Although I think marketing is great at landing new logos, and you need to do that, I think growing your existing logos is the most important function that a company does, and therefore your account managers. And in the way we've structured things at Level, at Amentra, and the way that work at Defiance, account management needs to be somebody who knows enough about the technology and the clients and salespersonship. But I could see combining the two as well. At NextGrid, I would say that they've combined the two functions pretty well and have actually been able to build some to build some growth by that approach. But it's a little different than the way I would approach. But one of the first hires I will make will be executive support.
Good.
Now,
that's comforting.
At Stratified, they've Brad, the chief revenue officer, and Derek, the CEO, and Kevin, the CTO. They're really the three people who run that company, and the reason it's been so successful. And I interviewed Derek a couple podcasts ago. They were really smart and brought on two folks who help out with just managing their day-to-day and making sure that they're not wasting time, and making sure that, and it isn't, that that work is very important, but if you're thinking about 6 sales calls that you're prepping for, and you're thinking about and you're thinking about the flight and what time you're going to get on it, and then where you're going to book your hotel, and then you're thinking about how do I schedule all of these other things. It's just hard to do that and maintain effectiveness.
Yeah, I've never had an executive assistant, and I think in terms of their account management perspective, I just want them to manage the accounts that I'm in control of.
Okay.
Not necessarily the company-wide account manager. Those are also our next hires. We currently have one on the marketing side, and we need to be at 3 to 5 here in the next 60 to 90 days. So overall, though, yeah, I'm feeling the burn in terms of the situation where you just described. We're have some travel this week, company-wide travel, and who had to book all the travel and everything? That was me.
It's a great use of your time.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah, economics 101 right there would say that's not what's supposed to be happening, but screw economics 101. So yeah, I can feel where that would just really free me up. I mean, over the course of the next 2 days before we fly, I'm worried about all of the logistics of our trip, where really I should just be kind of really focused on our clients. And so to me, that's the next iteration in my specific office, is to allow me to worry about just clients, just strategy, just the kind of real meat and potatoes of our day-to-day business.
That's awesome. Yeah, some of the best advice, it wasn't the same advice, but it was along the same lines. Some of the best advice I ever got was from a gentleman named Chris Halligan, who's a very successful entrepreneur and businessman here in Charlotte. And he told me very early on at Level, Chris and I were doing all of the selling, and we had an inside sales rep who wasn't selling much. We didn't equip him with the tools, so I don't blame him, but he never sold anything. And I was just trying to find the right salesperson, the right person but not just salesperson, but real VP of sales. And
that had not only the tactical sales strategy, but the conceptual sales strategy, and could then impart that on everyone else.
And just drive that. Yeah, exactly. And so I had asked Halligan to refer one of his friends, and the timing wasn't right. And he said, "Can I just give you a suggestion?" He's like, you want to hire somebody to lead sales. That's a very important function for any company. Arguably the most important.
Sure.
Arguably.
It's your first impression to every customer.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, I suggest that you pay them what you need to pay them, and you make them a business partner. He's like, don't cheapskate on the equity, give them real equity. And he laid out some very tactical guidelines that were very, very helpful. And I'm not going to share, but it was, suffice to say, it was more equity than I would have given otherwise, and it was very aggressive, but it was also very smart. Like, have it vest over a schedule, and I think that applies to really anything that you build on your team. Not that you need to give a bunch of equity, but that think about what it is that you want to improve in the company, and then go after it with go after it the way that you need to go after it to make it happen. And so in the case of an executive assistant or some of these other roles, they're all going to be different depending on just how chaotic and hectic that is, and how much skill is required by that. But you need to not think about what is this going to do to my cost structure. And that this isn't for you. This is just this was for me. Yeah. Think about what you want the company to actually look like and how you want it to behave, and then build it accordingly.
That makes a lot of sense, and that kind of ties back into what you were saying. If you build a business that you want to own forever, you might not own it forever. And I just tweaked that a little bit. Sure. That's kind of that same principle. Love that.
Yep. So what are you doing? I'm just hitting all of the things that nobody ever does well at any consulting company. So I apologize for dragging you under the bus. Dragging you into this shitstorm. But what are you doing for knowledge sharing?
Thank you. Yes.
By the way, we've shifted gears. And first on the Defiance podcast, we've gone to red wine. This is not one of my favorites. This is one I picked up, but I thought it would be nice to have a glass of red wine, because I think you're a wine guy too.
I am. Yeah, I do enjoy the old grape. I've been on a little white wine kick lately, which has been interesting. I'm traditionally, all big, bold reds, but ever since the weather temperature started to increase, I'm now at a place in my maturity to where I don't feel like I'm going to be looked at as a female if I drink white wine. So
I've gone all the way in on rosé, which is actually my new.
That's what it's all about.
I'm taking it a step further and actually will drink a frosé. Everywhere I see a frosé, I drink it.
Rosé. Have you gone all the way to the ice pop in the rosé?
I have not. No, that sounds amazing.
So that is like the pinnacle of the path that you're going down. There's a frozen popsicle in a sparkling prosecco, and so you can get this kind of multi-flavor going. You know, I mean, we'll have to we'll do it.
Chrissy, if you're listening, we must have this.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, cheers, by the way.
Cheers, yes, cheers. Thank you for supplying the grapes here.
So again, back to knowledge sharing, and I'll just tell you this. I'll just share this. I don't know that anybody ever gets this right. This is, for those who've never been in consulting, you learn more shit, good and bad, that is more useful, and this data has to be valuable. And we all know it's valuable. And we know that there are things that we've learned on other projects that could save our clients a lot of time. And yet, I don't think anybody does a really good job with it. Could save us time as well. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that you have hit on the thing that we are doing the worst right now, which is managing our knowledge base.
Mm-hmm.
We have a notes repository, but that's about the extent of our knowledge base and sharing. That is one of my kind of potentially Q3, Q4 initiatives, is clean all of that up, because I think out of that, a lot of new processes will be born, but where I'm not in a day-to-day position to be able to focus my time on that just yet, unfortunately, I understand it's very valuable and can see how it will make us run overall significantly more efficient as a business as we go, because we can look back on our experience and our history and just say, yeah, we're going to eliminate these 5 things and add these 3 things, and this is going to go a lot smoother. But for me right now, that's lower on the list than it probably should be.
That's always the story.
Yeah.
Right?
And so
we always end up with an email blast going out that says, hey, who knows anything about XYZ?
Yeah.
And Slack improved things a little bit for us.
It really has. Yeah. I think overall, just in terms of communication, I think that's knowledge sharing 101 is just general communication. And Slack has helped a little bit. It's less siloed in an email inbox and more kind of fluid in your Slack channels, but still overall, I know that we're operating at probably 10% of our what we actually should be doing in terms of knowledge sharing and managing that data.
Good. I'm glad to know that we weren't the only ones who suck at it.
Just run me over and hit me with a bus, why don't you?
Do you have any partnerships that you leverage for sales or delivery or anything else?
It's a good question. For delivery, yes. Sales, not currently, other than just my close network, and I've made it all. I've made them all aware that we're designed to help people, and we're going to do a really great job. So I think that I'm just trying to make our personal, intrapersonal network comfortable recommending us to their friends. I think that the word of mouth recommendation is far more valuable, saves you more time inevitably, because, for example, we went to a new client last week, a very large machine shop. They're producing things for SpaceX and Blue Origin, among a couple of other companies.
They're allowed to work for both. That's great.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I mean, but total ITAR compliant facility. I mean, just an amazing place. Hundreds of machines, very precise, and we got that business out of a recommendation. So we kind of skipped the entire intro and the entire real sales process just based on a solid recommendation, and we just got down to tactically, okay, how can we help you? We don't have to do the song and dance and prove our worth and our value to you. It's just you're trusting whoever recommended us to you, and you're allowing us to just come in and start day one helping versus.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's been really helpful for us.
Excellent. What do you spend most of your time doing these days? Not the last couple of weeks getting the office built out, but generally, where do you spend most of your time?
Generally, I spend most of my time kind of thinking critically on not only problems for our customers, but problems for ourselves. So I would call myself, if I had another title besides CEO, I would say that it'd be lead strategist, and that from a client perspective as well as an internal perspective. So I'm constantly thinking of creative ways to have our brand exposed to new people, as well as solving problems for the brands that we support.
That's great. No, that's where you want to be spending most of your time. I can't imagine a better place to be spending
it's fun. I really like it a lot. I get to communicate with a lot of people that are significantly more intelligent than I am, which just makes me better.
Yeah,
overall.
That is. So what is the future for Refinery House? Do you plan to keep this one for the long haul?
I think so, man. I think this is the one, at least for the foreseeable future. This is it. I mean, we're going all in on this one, and we kind of want to be a reputable company in terms of quality of services delivered. So I think this is where I'm going to stay for a while. I'm excited by some side projects as well, but this is going to be the meat and potatoes for the foreseeable future.
Well, that's great. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here on the questioning away from Refinery House. But before I do, is there anything else you'd like to speak about, or anything we've missed? Or
no, I think we've kind of gone A to Z here. This is the first time that I've publicly sort of recounted my business history in a very long time, and my very short business history.
Well, and this is what I'm trying to get with the podcast, is that just the nature of my career has led me to, I have a lot of interesting discussions, and a lot of my friends end up asking me about different conversations that I have. And yours I find so fascinating. It would be fascinating if you were my age, but I think it's even more so because of the compressed timeline that you've done it on. Yeah,
well, I very much appreciate that. No, I'm more fascinated by your story as well. I mean, it's a significant story, and I'm just thankful that we've gotten to know each other fairly well over the past few weeks and months, and I'm looking forward to potential projects together, really.
Well, and along those lines, folks, Bryan and I actually just invested in a software vendor that is revolutionizing software and payment processing in the legal cannabis industry.
Yeah.
So this is our first collaboration of many, I hope. And in honor of that, I thought that it was a good idea for us to break out a vape pen with fully legal hemp in it, because it is hemp and CBD are fully legal.
Totally legal in the state of North Carolina.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's where we are, and that's what we're smoking.
So hopefully North Carolina follows suit of the other more progressive states around us, and the next time we do this interview, it's gone full legal, and we'll do a full Joe Rogan, Elon Musk impression. But in the meantime,
we gotta stick with the legal stuff here. No, I appreciate that. We're actually I don't know if I've told you, but we're working on a CBD brand as well. So
that's excellent.
I'm excited by the potential of that.
I've been using CBD oil myself, and I've been experimenting with the doses. I try some that are very high and some that are low. For those who don't know, CBD oil, there's two major components to marijuana: THC, which is the psychoactive component, and then CBD, which is a non-psychoactive component and is fully legal federally, as I understand it.
It is.
As part of the industrial hemp. And CBD is known to be used in the treatment of a lot of things where other more conventional treatments have failed, and a lot of it comes down, from my understanding, to its operation on inflammation pathways. And I've certainly, when I've taken it, whether in the form of a cream or a tincture or pills that I've taken from your experiment, I've seen that the inflammation levels go down. I've also seen that my deep sleep, I track all of my sleep with my Aura ring here, and my deep sleep is just piss poor. I get plenty of sleep over a week period or 2 week period, but my deep sleep tends to be
quality.
Pretty poor.
You're at the quantity, not quality stage.
Exactly. Yeah. And the CBD seems to help that when I bump the dosages.
Great. Yeah, I'm still waiting on my Aura to show up.
Good luck. They're back ordered.
Yeah, you convinced me. I've been on the list for a while now, but overall, I've had similar experience with CBD in terms of quality of sleep and just allowing you to really hit that complete deep realm of sleep.
So absolutely.
That's great.
Well, Bryan, I think the only thing you like to do more than start companies is buy cars. So talk to the audience a little bit about what your garage looks like these days.
Yeah. So I am a car fanatic. I'm completely addicted, and it was such a neat thing to learn that you yourself are not naive or not aware of the vehicles in your garage. But yeah, so currently my daily is a C63 AMG, the 4-door model. It's actually the pre-5.5 V8 twin turbo, so it's the 6.3 naturally aspirated V8.
Oh wow.
And I've tuned it, I've redone some internals, as well as a little bit of exhaust and intake work. We're just over 600 at the rear wheels in that vehicle in terms of horsepower.
And it's not a heavy car either.
It's
heavy, but it's not like my S-Class.
It's not a Rolls Royce or it's not an S-Class. Yeah, but so it's actually the same motor that's in the S63 of that same year, just detuned, and we've kind of retuned it back to the S63 spec and actually a little bit beyond. So yeah. Other than that, I mean, I've had a lot of cars over the years. I mean, I've had everything from a Toyota FJ Cruiser all the way to a super hard single seat M3 and everything in between. Full bolt-on 135, BMW, of course. I mean, just so many vehicles. I was thankful enough that last year I was able to help my dad get a 996 911 turbo.
Oh, wow.
So that lives in his garage.
Now, was the 996 the last air cooled, or was
it
the
was actually
that
was the first liquid cooled?
Okay, the first water cooled.
So the 993 is the last air cooled. Yeah, and I'm currently hunting a 1991 964 911 C2S. If anyone out there has one they want to sell, just hit me up in the comments. We can make it happen. But yeah, I mean, I've had so many different cars. And I'm constantly looking at them. I'm on the list at Hendrick BMW here. Shout out, yeah, Scott, you're the man. I'm on the list number 1 in Charlotte for the M2 CS, which is supposed to be coming out early fall.
So it's interesting. I've owned Motorsport and I've owned AMG, and I'd love to just get your thoughts on the two, because I thought I was a Motorsport guy only, and I love what they stand for, and I still do. But yeah, I've come to the dark side. But I for me, and I want to hear your opinion because you're a lot smarter on this than I am. But for me, although I love the AMG and I love the particular AMG that I have, I feel like I identify with the Motorsport more. But
very interesting. So to me, the M's, they're a little bit sharper, they're a little lighter, they're a little cleaner, they're more precise. An M3 comes through on all 4 wheels, no smoke, perfectly balanced, hits the apex, and then, ascends in its a low or high horsepower, low torque way, and the AMG, it comes through the corner completely sideways, all 4 wheels smoking, loud, just complete savagery, still hits the apex, and but it goes off in a cloud of just pure torque, so
with 27 speakers blaring
exactly and just exactly, that is 100% correct. So I know that you mentioned you identify with Motorsport a little
I
bit
think
more.
I do. I can't say that I like one better than the other, but I do.
So I've had both, as you have, and I can say now that the AMG is my clear preference. Just in terms of complete savagery.
The sound, there's no doubt. When I traded in my last M5, and they're like, "What'd you get?" and I told them the S63 coupe, and they were like, they looked at me and they're like, "We get it." The sales reps, and they were like, the one thing that we can never touch AMG on is the sound. It's a savage sound, and yet it's the most comfortable and refined ride.
It's amazing, isn't it? They give you the best of both worlds. The M's, I know that they've started to pipe the exhaust note in through the speakers, and cheating. I knew once that they did that, they kind of lost my attention a little bit in terms
That's
of
for Tesla.
rawness.
Tesla needs to do that.
Precisely.
You can do it naturally with your engine.
Exactly. Yeah. If you can't do it naturally, then you're doing it wrong. In my opinion. So
Do you have a grail car at this point?
Ooh, so many grail cars. I think a real.
And the answer doesn't have to be one, but
So I mean, it goes back, all the way to the Shelby Cobra, the 427 AC Shelby Cobra.
I'm not a muscle car guy, but that's not a muscle car either.
Me neither. It's just like, it's art in my opinion. I mean, a hand hammered aluminum body with just significant horsepower. That was amazing. And then it goes probably to the F50 Ferrari. You know, kind of. I mean, that thing is just mad, completely mental in my opinion.
It's funny for me. It goes to the 959 Porsche.
Oh, I skipped the 959.
But that was also the same time as the Ferrari F40.
Similar,
so I would have said an F40 over an F50. But it was just because you were probably like 3 years old when these cars came out.
You're exactly right. No, the F50 just did it for me.
A much better car than the F40, by the way.
I don't know, man. That was I believe that was the first forced induction Ferrari, the TTV8 in that point, and then
by all accounts, the most frightening experience waiting for that turbo to kick in.
That is what I understand. Same for the 959 now. From what I understand, I know several people that have owned these vehicles. I myself have not yet been in an F40 or an F50, but
I'm not either.
I've sat in an F50 and seen the motor. I mean, that V12 is just, I mean, that is significant. But and then after the F50, I'd say it pretty much comes completely modernized to the LaFerrari, the 918. I'm not a big McLaren fan, but you know, I think the 488 Pista is a realistic grail car that I think is just.
Well, that's an interesting point. There are realistic grail cars and non-realistic.
Yes. I've drawn the line out. I probably won't be Bugatti's next brand new 17 million euro buyer. So.
Well, so if that's not your next purchase, what is?
So as I mentioned, I'm on the list for the M2 CS. I think the other day we were chatting and I offered up my spot, but if I still have that spot when it comes around, I think that's going to be it.
Okay.
I'm really excited by that car. For those that don't know, it's the BMW M2, brand new, same chassis as the current M2, but they've switched the motors out to be the current M4 motor. Which is the S65, and they've also offered carbon ceramic brakes as an option with a lot more carbon as well throughout the body. So it not only drops weight, increases power. The brakes are, I mean, that's a huge deal for anyone that wants to run it on the track, and then increase kind of tuning ability from the S65 motor. I mean, those cars they're making 700-800 horsepower easy.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a blast.
It has to stop at some point, this horsepower war.
I mean, it's wild. You know, here we have the gentlemen Casey and Kevin Howarth who started underground racing, and right now they're twin turboing every new Huracan and R8 that comes out. They're making well over 2,000 horsepower. And they're running the standing half mile, which is 0 to the end of a half mile distance, and they're doing over 250 miles an hour. Jeez. So, you know, they're currently winning the speed war and the horsepower war. I mean, there's always going to be someone with a faster, more expensive car than you. So,
yeah.
You know, it's just what makes you happy. What does it for you?
No, I agree. Let's be honest. If we just want to go fast, we'll get a Tesla Roadster and game over, right? But
when Elon produces them.
Well, Well, it may be 12 years from now.
Yeah, if he doesn't get thrown in jail by the SEC.
Is there a car you've owned that you'd call your favorite?
You know, I was thinking about that question on the way over here literally today, and weirdly I can say the C63 is my favorite car that I've owned because it's so versatile.
Yeah.
It's I've taken it on a significant road trip. It's been phenomenal. Halfway through the road trip, you can blast the Corvette on the interstate, you know, but then still have 4 doors and a huge trunk to put all your stuff in. It has a phenomenal sound system, better than any other car that I've ever had. And so to me, all around, I would pick that one.
That's great.
And I mean, I've retuned it, as I said, so it's, you know, pretty ridiculous, but
my broker that I work with just got another business partner of mine, a C63, and he loves it. He absolutely, and he's owned a G-Wagon, he's owned the old 2-door S-Class, I forget what they called it, the CL.
Yeah.
And then he had an old SEL, and then he's got a collector's SEL as well.
Oh, wow.
So, and he absolutely loves it. So I'm looking forward. I'm going to go visit him in Dallas in a couple weeks here, and I'm looking forward to checking the C63 out.
Yeah, take for a nice little rip.
Yeah, exactly. So what else do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
Let's see. I enjoy. So I went to college at Charleston, so I inherently enjoy eating. The food
The
scene
cuisine
there.
down there is amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, my dad's been pushing nice cuisine on me since the day I was born, so it's kind of natural at this point.
But you haven't gained any weight from it, obviously. Is that because you've got good metabolism, or are you working out on the weekends?
Right now it's my metabolism,
Okay.
metabolism supporting me through this one. I've been picking your brain on the gym and diet questions lately, so we'll see what happens when I really put a solid effort into that. But overall, just being on the water, whether that's the beach or fishing, really enjoy that. I get out and shoot as much as I can, ski, sporting clays.
That's great. I've not done that, but I hear that's a lot of fun.
Oh well, then come on. You'll have to come anytime you want to go. It's just about 20 minutes from here. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. I just spoke to a friend of mine from a prior life who he said, I'm coming down to North Carolina. And I said, what for? And he goes, oh, we're doing deep sea fishing. And I'm like, of course, he's coming from DC. And
there you go.
Of course, that's what you're doing.
Fantastic, yeah.
So, obviously, I mentioned that you and I did a recent investment together. How do you think about angel investing? Is it something you do a lot of, or think a lot about, or?
I think about it a lot. I don't do enough of it. I think I'm more of an avid looker and a patient buyer. I think the entrepreneurial sort of fad scared me a bit. Any kid in a gray hoodie could get $100,000 really easily over the last few years, and it didn't matter, what your work ethic was like. So I've kind of started looking more at the people versus the idea and the product. I think execution and timing can beat kind of the actual idea. So all of that to say,
I say that fully. I tell people all the time, I don't give a fuck about your idea. There's a lot of really good ideas, but you know what? There isn't a lot of good execution and good. And I ask people, are you willing to beg, borrow, and steal every dollar not steal, but beg and borrow every dollar from your family members in order to commercialize this technology? And if your answer isn't yes, then get the fuck out of here. You're not gonna be successful.
You can't win with that mindset if you're not willing. That's obviously a metaphor, but it just kind of displays the lengths that you're willing to go to make it happen.
Absolutely. What about networking? Do you do a lot of that? That's something that personally early in my career I neglected, and I wish I hadn't. It was once we started NextGrid that I committed to, okay, now I'm gonna spend my time networking. At Mentor, I spent all of my time with the sales team, with the delivery team, and with our clients, and spent no time outside of the organization. And with NextGrid, I said, I'm going to build my network, and a lot of that ended up leading directly to relationships that became Level and other things that I'm doing now. So I'm curious, someone 27 years old, how much do you think about? We obviously met through networking of sorts, through a mutual friend, but
so that's an interesting thing. I don't really think about it as like, okay, I need to go network right now. It's more of just habit, or I think that's part of my personality. You're much more extroverted than someone like myself. Potentially, so I've labeled myself as an outgoing introvert. So I think that's kind of based on how you recharge, and I completely recharge on my own. So I can, have those weird maniacal creative moments, but also have a good time in a social setting. And I'm thankful, for being good friends with Jeff, who is good, knew you and well enough to make the connection here. So clearly there's inherent benefit to networking. So, but I think to me it's more of just my desire rather than a project or a kind of a goal set of mine.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the things I've had to just come to grips with in the way that my networking has evolved is the fact that to really do networking well, I think you have to not focus on what do I get out of this, and is there an immediate tie into this? And that's very easy to say, but I think difficult to implement, because you start taking meetings that have no strategic relevance, no value whatsoever, and it's hard. There's a lot of demands on our times already. But then I also look, if I'm too careful on the other side, I would have never met you or some of the other folks.
Yeah, you would have never taken. Yeah.
So
no reason whatsoever. No, I'm thankful that I'm careless enough to take some of these meetings.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's like anything. There's just a balance that we hopefully figure out.
Some good hemp.
That is good hemp oil. So I want to go back to something you said earlier, and I want to be cautious with it, because I don't want you to reveal too much here. But it sounds like you've met Gary Vee. What was that like?
So yeah, we're actually, as an agency, flying up tomorrow to go spend some time at VaynerMedia, and we'll kind of circle back around to it at some point in the near future to talk about what it was like. But overall, we've had a great experience knowing them the short amount of time that we've had, and I think I'm so attracted to their culture,
Sure.
and I think Gary's built that as a person, and I can completely validate that that is true 100% across the board, that he's the same as you see on social as he is,
Sure.
in real life, and I think that can be said about anything that he does. What you see on the surface is really what you get deep down. So
that's awesome. I mean, to change the number of lives that he's clearly changed, and to do it in a genuine way
he's seemingly impacted a ton of people, which is really cool, and I'm excited for the ways that he's continuing to innovate, impacting people, literally, the different mediums, the different ways, the different concepts, different people, all of that. So yeah, we'll circle back after you've met him and talk about that experience for sure.
So you've also you cheer for the Clemson teams.
I do. I bleed orange. The Clemson teams.
So I come from an old school ACC family. My dad and brothers and my aunt all went to UVA, and
so you were the black sheep.
I was the black sheep. Did not go to UVA.
Where'd you go?
I went to George Mason, which is a large public school in Northern Virginia, and then I went to Duke.
There
a small private school.
Yeah. That small private school. Yeah, we don't know them by their basketball team or football team
or lacrosse team.
No.
So, but going back to, I was a fan when ACC might have been 7. This was pre-Florida State, and Clemson ruled the roost back then. And Clemson, in fact, had beaten UVA. I don't think UVA had ever beaten Clemson in their history, if I'm not mistaken. So they were the original powerhouse of the ACC. But then there was a good 10, 15-year period where the ACC was all about Virginia Tech, Miami, Florida State. ACC wasn't shit in the national scene, let's be honest.
No.
And now you look, it's hard to argue that it's not hard to argue that Clemson is the best program in the country. Sorry to the Alabama and the Auburn fans, but at the very moment, 2 out of 3, clearly built for long-term success. And again, I'm not somebody who watches the program closely, but as an ACC fan in general, I'm obviously impressed with what they're doing. What do you think changed in the program to turn it into such a great program now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that it's the leadership there. I mean, I think Dabo obviously has completely changed the game in terms of what it means to deliver leadership. I think you look at the way that Saban does it versus the way that Dabo does it, and I think those are comparable in terms of the best 2 programs in the country right now. Auburn, no shot. Just sorry.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm so thankful that Clemson was able to figure out how to hire a guy like Dabo and let him work his way up, and now he has command of the ship, and you can see the fruits of his labor that he's been sowing for over a decade now. But yeah, he would refuse it, but I can single-handedly say that it's Sweeney.
That's awesome. What lessons can we as business people take from a winning program like theirs?
I think we can take a lot of cards out of their culture, that's for sure. I think it's really interesting how they're a very people-first program. I mean, he said himself, he wants to serve the players' hearts, and then that will in turn allow them to be better players versus forcing them to be better players and skipping the kind of who you are as a person part. I think that for us as leaders can be easily turned into our just corporate culture in general.
It's interesting. It's not the same thing, but one of my mentors, who eventually I'm going to get on the podcast when I good enough at doing it. He likes to say quite a few different things, but he talks about change management, and he's written a book on change management, and he's one of the experts. And again, I hope to have him on the podcast at some point here shortly. But he says the number one thing that companies get wrong in change management is they focus on what it means to the company, and employees don't give a shit. They care about themselves. And so the first thing he does when planning a large change management, and this gentleman has done at Georgia Pacific, at Medtronic, some very large change management efforts. And everything starts with, what does this mean for the individual? Because it's the individual who's going to make it happen. And if they're bought in on the vision, it's going to run more smoothly. And if they're not, then you're going to have trouble. And it sounds like you're seeing the same thing at Clemson. We focus first on the players and what they're doing, and if we make them happy and they feel good and they feel empowered to make good decisions, they're going to do that.
Yeah, I feel like that's the same thing that my parents did for me. So I mean, it kind of all ties back in. It's neat to see, a players first program sort of.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really interesting. I went to George Mason for undergrad, and we've been struggling for 30 years to try to get a football team. And there was a member of the board of visitors or the board of regents, I can't remember the two, who said, we don't want to be known for our sports program. And he said that the year after the Final Four run. And all of us who were observers said, this is ridiculous. Like, we are known for one thing, our Final Four run outside of the Beltway. Like, nobody knows who we are except for our Final Four run. And Duke has embraced it. Duke is absolutely an academic powerhouse by any measure, whether it's the business school, the law school, the medical school. The undergraduate programs are amazing, fantastic school, but they've embraced Coach K and what he's built there, and I think it's great. I think that there are very few schools that are going to be good enough academically to be known, and across the globe, no matter where you go, anybody that's paying attention. And yes, if you're Harvard or you're Oxford or you're Cambridge, there's a small handful of schools who may be able to do that on their own, but the athletic side of it, you should take advantage of every advantage that you've got.
Yeah, I mean, look at Stanford. I think they do a great job. They've had a really competitive football team for a lot of years. And they're also one of the academic powerhouses. So absolutely,
yeah. I think you can have both. Well, all right, Bryan. Let's wrap this up. This has been a great discussion, and I hope folks are inspired to follow in your footsteps. I know I'm certainly inspired. Is there anything else you think we ought to say at this point, or anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, I think I'm just really thankful for this experience. This is my first podcast. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, this is number one. And
might be a while before you have as much whiskey or wine or hemp oil for the next one.
Especially the hemp oil.
Yeah.
But absolutely, no, I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing your story again. This is why I'm doing it, is I think that people need to hear more of these stories. So I really appreciate you joining me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Cool. That was awesome, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hope it didn't go too long.
No, that was great.
I like personally going longer for them because I just think you get better questions.